We are facing a historic vote tomorrow on yet another bill. You saw 25 failed last year. And we have one that's gotten as close as it's ever been to passing tomorrow. It's called SB 3095. It's a Senate bill. So we're waiting to see whether a handful of people that we showed you in the film are actually going to step up and do the right thing. It wouldn't stop the practice. These chemical companies are experimenting on our island, as you've seen, but it would initiate a 100-foot buffer zone around the schools, which seems really modest to me. It would, for the first time, ask for disclosure of the pesticides that they're using. We don't have a lot of information about the chemicals, either singly or in combination, and you can imagine how many combinations of pesticides. Your film said there's something like 90 pesticides, so you can imagine the endless combinations that they can make with these pesticides. And it's not just for the residents, the people that live there, it's also for visitors alike, like yourselves, who may not know that they're going to be exposed to these kinds of heavy restricted use chemicals when you visit our islands.
Yeah.
Just go out.
Are we good there?
Here.
There you go. Listen now. So I'm sure you have questions based on what you've seen this evening, and we're happy to answer them to the best of our abilities. Anybody would like to start?
Keely, I have a question.
Sure.
How did you get involved in making the film, and what were the difficulties you went through? There must have been opposition to some of the things you're putting up on the screen.
Well, my husband and I purchased some property in a house on the island of Kauai in 2002. And we made it our primary home for almost 3 years. We raised our children there. We put them in local school. I myself grew up in Hawaii as a child, and I wanted my children to experience aloha, which is something that really doesn't come anywhere else. You can, I'm sure, find forms of aloha in Italy or any other country that you visit, but Hawaii has its own unique brand of aloha. And I was really hopeful that they would discover that and embrace that and carry that in their hearts wherever they went as adults. So imagine my surprise in 2013 when I started learning from Dustin and Fern and Gary what we were up against, what was happening on the island. And as a former journalist, I really wanted to do the research. I had a wonderful partner, my producing partner, Teresa Tico, who unfortunately could not be here tonight. I don't know if any of you have heard, Kauai in particular is under a state of emergency on the North Shore, and we had historic flooding, which they call one of the first big floods from climate change. So the North Shore is like an island on the island itself. It's cut off from everywhere else right now. You can only boat in or helicopter in or walk out. I don't even think they're allowing you to walk right now.
They won't let you walk out.
Yeah.
You gotta, it's like Tahiti, you gotta boat in or jet ski in just to get home.
Or take a helicopter.
Or, yeah, if you're lucky.
So Teresa sends her regards and aloha tonight. But it was her idea, really. She, on a swim, said, you know, I want to make a film about the bill, and I said, I'm in, and my husband agreed to executive produce, which means that we funded the project, and it's 3 years, a labor of love. It's certainly my love letter to Hawaii and to the people that I love about a place I love. So our hope, our genuine desire is that this is going to move the needle so that we can get legislation in place that protects not only the citizens and our children, but also visitors that come to Kauai. There just has to be a better way to do business. And regardless of your politics, I think it's really important that we can all agree on just a few simple things, that we want clean air, we want clean water, and we want clean food. And that, to me, is a bipartisan issue. So if you like this film tonight, and you know, we've probably invested, what, 3 years of your life and my life, and it's been quite a journey for us. Please help us by spreading the word on social media. I've never really asked that before, but I'm going to ask you now because I think that's the basis of us moving the needle forward. We need grassroots movement, and we need people like you to carry this message for us. Don't be shy if you're going to Kauai to write the Board of Tourism or the governor or any of the elected officials and find out if your accommodations are near a test site. I think that would be important for you to discover before you go there. And I think the other thing that you can really do is try to support this initiative through some of the better organizations. Earth Justice is my favorite right now. They do a lot of legislation work for us. They're attorneys, and they put into practice you know, how to help us, how to legislate, how to make this change really happen from the top up while we're working from the ground up. And it's going to take both approaches. We can't just have one. We're going to need both to be successful.
These two gentlemen standing right next to me I've known for a very long time, and I knew that they were making these kinds of films. I knew it in my head. But when I very first saw this film up on screen, I felt it in my heart. And so they're local guys, and why don't you guys tell us how you got involved in Kauai?
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. Really appreciate it. Keely, it's a pleasure to share the stage with you. Dustin, we love you. You know that. My family moved to Kauai about 20 years ago, part of my family, and John and I were big fans of Dustin Barker growing up. Loved his surfing style. Looked up to him growing up, and one day we said, he's doing some stuff on GMOs, and we knew about what was going on. We said, let's shoot him an Instagram message and see if he responds. And I knew a couple of the boys on the North Shore, and I said, these guys can vouch for us. And Dustin said, okay. He called me on the phone, and then 2 weeks later, we were out shooting the first march. So 5 years later, we have this movie, and it has been, just like Keely, a labor of love. We haven't really had any support other than motivational support from our network, and it was self-financed from day one. And the reason that we kept coming back was because of Dustin, and he continued to inspire us in different ways. I mean, just running around the island was something that we were standing right next to him the entire time and couldn't wrap our heads around how he was doing it. He pretty much ran a marathon every single day for 3 days in a row. And for us, we said, okay, if he can do these things for his community, then we can continue to show up and tell his story. I could continue talking, but then John won't have anything to talk about. So I'm going to hand the mic and give him a shot.
We started Change for Balance 10 years ago, and our goal was to use the power of storytelling to make the world a better place. And there's no better story to tell than one man who takes on juggernauts of companies, putting everything on the line. And so we're just constantly inspired by Dustin, everything he does, everything he stands for, what he's willing to risk. And, you know, we had one thing on our whiteboard while we were editing. No worries. And it was that this is not a GMO movie. Yes, it's about that, but this is a social justice issue. There's things happening on Kauai. There are injustices happening to the people, those people living on the front lines. You heard it from Clayton. This is not a joke to him. This is very serious. And it to us was a story that needed to be told. And like Roddy mentioned, we didn't have any financing, but we knew we needed to do it. And we thank you all for coming tonight because, like Keely said, education is the key and awareness is everything with these issues. And we just thank you all for coming.
Yes, this lady right here.
Yeah, what about that? I was really impressed with the idea of making tourism aware of what's going on in the islands. We all love Hawaii. I've been there dozens and dozens of times. Love the island, but you need to make tourism aware of what's going on over there. We can be a very powerful source to make this thing happen. Get tourists behind the whole thing.
I'll take that question.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and I have in the film. We've addressed it, and we're asking why are they protecting a $200 million a year industry when they bring in $15 billion a year in tourism? It really doesn't make sense. So you're right, and it's going to take everybody's voice to make sure that the people who are in charge in Hawaii hear your concerns. And if this does start to affect tourism, they'll make a significant change. And that's what we're hoping. And not just because we want to impact the tourism industry. It's not our goal to hurt that industry or any of the people that work in it. It's our goal to make Hawaii the idea that you have in your mind when you go there, that it's safe, that it's healthy, that it's a place to be restored and rejuvenated and to rest your mind and your weary body. People spend a lot of money coming there. This is the last thing that they really expect. And you certainly don't want to bring your children over to the island and have them exposed to these kind of chemicals as well.
Social networking.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about strategy, how I go at what I do. And some of the first people I approached was the Board of Tourism. And I went to the Board of Tourism. I told them this is something that could affect our biggest industry in Hawaii. and they just laughed at me. And to kind of put it in their face, I did my first march that they came to was in Poipu, which is the biggest tourist population on the island, where there's hotels, and that's kind of the biggest town for tourism. But what people don't really realize when they come to Poipu is that they're surrounded by experimental fields over there. So that wind actually blows those, whatever they're spraying, right into those hotels over there and the homes and everything. So strategically, that's why I hit Poipu first. I could have went to Hanalei or Lihui or anywhere else, but I went to Poipu for that specific reason, as a strategy to kind of like shake up the tourist industry and just like educate them. And that's always been like, for us, tourism is our number one industry. Yeah, farming is important, but when it comes down to making money for our islands, tourism is number one. And I don't even make money off of tourism. Everything I do is off of other things, but I understand that perspective, you know what I mean? So strategically, as like, it's somewhat of a war going on between us and these chemical companies. And I like studying history, and strategy is always the victor. Yeah.
Do you have a question, sir?
Yeah, long-range plans, like what's happened in the schools. Are you going to the schools? And, because they'll be voting soon. And I think that's very important. Have you?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I've tried to use like my professions of being a professional athlete and other things to kind of like reach out to the next generation and educate them on what's going on. So once they get to that age, they know where they want to put their money and their votes and everything, you know. So that's kind of always been my strategy again, is to hit that range of people, from the little kids to our high school kids. And I'm not too worried about the older people because they're pretty set in their ways, you know. I'm sorry to say, but like people look at me, they're like, this guy's a young punk. But the young kids, they're coming up and they're very educated on what's going on our islands, and they know what they want. So that's where we kind of are. That's always been my focus, is the next generation coming up, because we always want stuff to happen right now, but it might not happen right now. But when our kids come up, they're really educated. Like the kids nowadays are so educated. They got social media, they got the internet, they can look up whatever, and then they can use their common sense to make up their mind, you know. And that's kind of where we're at with that, you know.
I think I saw some questions in the, yes, sir.
Yeah, can you tell everybody here, including myself, the best way to educate ourselves, the best way on social media to spread the word, where to share, what hashtag to use, what website to look up right now, so that we can all be a part of that in the biggest way
Yeah,
possible?
I mean, for me, like 10 years ago, I started learning about GMO, and I was, this is going on my island. I always seen these stickers, GMO-free Kauai. Huh? I always seen these stickers, and I was like, wow, what's going on in Kauai? I've always seen these stickers. There's these aunties who've been like, they're kind of like older hippie aunties, and they've been doing this for 15 years. GMO-free Kauai, GMO-free Kauai, and I was always, it's like, wow, never really thought of it until somebody showed me a documentary 10 years ago in Europe, and I was like, wow, that's going on my island. So then I went and educated myself. I looked at all the conspiracy theory websites. I looked at the companies' websites, and all the companies have the same thing to say. You know, they're kind of going off a blueprint of what they're doing, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at all these conspiracy websites, and then I went into like, you know, I looked at the history of these companies, where they've been, all the lawsuits they have. Everywhere they've been sued for poisoning communities and poisoning people and water and everything. And I was like, I had to use my own common sense to say, oh, this is not good, you know. And that's what really motivated me to even do anything, is because I spent 2 years educating myself, you know. And I try to tell everybody, don't listen to me, do your own homework, you know, because I'm not God. I don't know everything, you know. Don't listen to me. You go learn for yourself, and and you make up your own mind, use your own common sense to what is right and wrong, you know. But one company or two companies owning all our seed sources and our food sources or our water sources, that just doesn't sound right to me. You know what I mean?
For
so,
right now, with
I'll take that
with how everybody
Yeah.
feels right now, and
Let's just stay with one question. Your question was, what can we do right now?
Right.
Okay, so there are several organizations. I would start with Earth Justice because they're the ones who are in the courtroom and they need funding. And if you can't fund them, then you can certainly donate your time or talent. Center for Food Safety, they have a Hawaii branch, but they also have one out of San Francisco and Washington, D.C. And they're also working on legislation, and they're also lawyers. And together they have been in court fighting to get these bills passed and helping to get this bill drafted and into legislation. So we'll see what happens tomorrow. It's a historic vote. You can tune in and probably watch it online. And you can certainly check our website, Poisoning Paradise. You can spread the word through social media. There are several people on Instagram that follow these kinds of trends, from Dustin and Fern, who are in our movie. Do you have an Instagram page for your film? Yeah, so follow
That's my
our
main question.
Facebooks, our website, our Instagram, and you can start sharing those things. Really, it's going to take all of you spreading the word. We as filmmakers can only tell the story and go around and reach audiences like you, but you know, in my opinion, there's dark and there's light, and that's what the kahunas on Island have said to me. And they said, look, Spirit isn't political, but all of you have light and you have darkness, and if you want to be part of the light, you need to share that light. You need to spread that light and be that light. So we're going to rely on all of you to go out into the community now and share what you've heard tonight. And as Dustin said, do your own research. Don't take our word for it. Look it up for yourself. Certainly before you book passage to Hawaii, you might want to be educated about where you're staying, because as he said, if you're in Poipu, in the major mecca of tourism on the island, drift is relevant and real, and you probably will be exposed to these pesticides. And if you go visit Waimea Canyon, which is one of the #1 tourist destinations on our island, you are definitely going to be exposed to these pesticides. So, you know, educate yourself about the issue. We're doing our best to tell the story and bring it to as many people as possible, and now we're asking you to please help us do the same by sharing that message.
Unfortunately, I think we only have time for one more question. How about this gentleman? He had his hand up first.
The land that it's grown on, is it leased or is it owned by the chemical companies? And if it's leased, have you gone after when that lease would end? Is it a perpetuity or short term to insert some of the terms you want into the lease to prevent it that way?
These companies don't own nothing.
So they lease it from the state or the county?
It's all leased from private landowners and the state of Hawaii. But
On lands that are put in trust for the betterment of Native Hawaiian people.
that's where we can argue about it all day. But I mean, realistically, majority of the big lands in Hawaii belong to the people of Hawaii, the native people of Hawaii, by law. There was never a treaty of annexation, so therefore there is no real large landowners, and the state doesn't really own anything. They're just holding it kind of in ransom. But so therefore we're always in a dispute there, legally, mentally, about who owns the land. But that's why I always got into what I got into, because the Hawaiians are the real owners of the land. The Queen left it in her trust to the people, and that's where people we're kind of shifting. There's a new generation of kids growing up in Hawaii who are educated in their language, in their history, and they're understanding their past, and they know where they want to go in their future. So we're kind of in a time where we're at 100 years of a light. I'm having a loss for words, but a form of genocide by taking the language from people, taking is a form of taking their history. So Hawaiians weren't allowed to speak their own language throughout the early 1900s, and that kind of killed a lot of momentum in understanding their history and the real history of what's happened in Hawaii. So now the kids my age, about 35 years old, they've been raised from kindergarten to college in understanding and speaking their language. So now they're understanding their history. They're going into the old newspapers of the 1800s, knowing exactly what happened legally. They're lawyers. They're all coming up through college, and we're coming into a different time where the Hawaiian people are coming for what's theirs. You know, they have the biggest land trust in the world, and I think there's like billions of dollars that belongs to the Hawaiian people. So what we're coming into is a time of education and a time of consciousness where we're just kind of like planting a seed on where we're going. Like our movies are just kind of like a seed planted where people are using that as a tool to move into a more conscious future, a more you know, our farming practices, everything's changing. Our ideology of where we want to go with farming, with land use, with our whole lifestyle is kind of changing right now. And so that's kind of something that I like to bring out now and educate everybody on, is just that real history of Hawaii. And
so hopefully it'll change for the better.
It will. And we come from like the most prominent farming system in the world, you know.
Are the four of you available for a short time after the film, for in the lobby if people have more questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, did you say we have one more question? Sorry.
Yeah, no, we got
I'm Portuguese, so I speak a little bit too much, but.
No, it's very entertaining.
And just to answer that question too, the leases that were granted have been rolled over from the sugarcane days. They've been rolled over from the pineapple plantations. They haven't put in like an environmental impact report or study to determine how these practices would affect the island. None of that's been done. So they're actually like inheriting leases from the 1970s that are outdated. And as you saw in the film, they're doing something that's never really been done before. So it's hard for us to comprehend why the Department of Ag would allow this to happen without some real science and research. And also the state, before they lease lands that are put in trust for the betterment of Native Hawaiian people. As you saw, there are civil rights violations, there are human rights violations, the right to know isn't taking place, there's no right to opt out from these experiments. So it really is, it just goes on and on.
Yeah.
All right, last question.
Thank you very much. Actually, we did a last question. I'm sorry. Did you guys want to add anything else? No?
I want to thank everybody for coming. Thank you for your attention.
And please vote. Please remember to vote as you leave.
Thank you.